Is to continue with Zoom. I think we've only got one more week left, haven't we? And then we're going for a break for Pesach. Hopefully, it'll all be over. I'm not terribly sure about that. We thought at the beginning it was all going to be very short. It doesn't look so as though it's going to be. In fact, last Wednesday night, I was driving from here to the seminary I teach at in by Vagan. It's called Shari. Sorry, I can't remember his name. Anyway, Shari Bina, something like that. Anyway, so when I got to the 50, the big in, then that's when the alarms went off and the sirens went off. And I must admit, I felt very, very vulnerable. When you're walking in the street, there's always somewhere, an apartment or somewhere to run to. When you're in a car going at 50 miles an hour, I felt very vulnerable. I think I told you once about when I was in a plane crash in South Africa. Did I share that one with you? Yes, no. Well, I'm not going to take too long, but we'll do it another time. It was actually a crash landing. We'd lost the front wheels in takeoff. Anyway, so I mean, I really obviously thought I was going to die, as the captain announced to us. There was nothing to worry about. Then they explained we had no front wheels. Oh, yes, that's easy. So basically, though all those serious thoughts came back to me when I was driving the car, and I realized if I just zoomed down, zoom was the word, for about another minute, still safe time. There was a tunnel, and I could hide under there, and lots of people have done that as well. Just pull over and wait for it all to pass. But we're still a bit vulnerable, and to drive down to be with you all, or to even ask you to go out into the streets when you don't have to. I think Zoom is the safe thing to do. And I'm very much a believer in guarding your life as much as you possibly can. So that's why we're here in Zoom. Good. Thanks for waiting for me. Sorry for the mix-up, and they can't get this stupid thing to work. Anyway, I've not used Zoom for a long time, you see. And I'm back. Okay. Um, did I ever tell you the story about my second visit to Canada? Did that ever share that one with you? My second visit to Canada, when I moved to New York, I was invited the first time to give a lecture then, and then a few months later I was back again. And we all filed into the immigration hall, and there was various booths, and there was various immigration officers with bulletproof vests and guns. And it was my turn to step forward. And because I'd already been there, I know the script. Do we have any Canadians here? I've told you to mute yourselves, but you can give me a thumbs up. Any Canadians? No Canadians are looking at the screen. No, no Canadians. Tragedy. Anyway, so basically, the guy said to me, "What's your reason for visiting Canada?" And I said, "I'm here to give a lecture." And he said, "Are you a rabbi?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I'm a Russia." And I said, "What?" And he said, "I'm a Russia." And I said, "A Russian?" And he said, "You're a rabbi, yeah?" And I admitted the charge. And he said, "Well, you know about the four sons in the Haggadah, yeah?" And I said, "Yeah." Well, there's the Chacham, there's the Tam, She'eni Dilishol, and the Russia, yeah? Yeah, I said, "Well, I'm the Russia." Very nice. Mazel tov. What were you supposed to say? Anyway, and then he started to tell me his life story because, of course, when two Jews meet for the first time, if I'd noticed on his bulletproof vest, there was his name tag, which was Lerner. I would have sort of like got the idea. But anyway, basically, um, so he started to tell me his story, and his grandfather was a rabbi in Liverpool in England, and then he moved to America, and they didn't treat him nicely, and then the family moved to Canada, blah 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 blah, and a whole load of history. As piles of people are going, all the other desks, people are just stamping their papers. Why visiting Canada? Well, see my grandmother, and off they went. But not us, two Jews. Caused quite a lot of anti-Semitism, I think, that visit. Anyway, so basically, it occurred to me that no matter what he thought or didn't know or didn't think about why he was so proud to be um, a Russia, and he was a man of about 50, so he'll have children, I'm guessing, as well. So that's now great great grandchildren who are probably proud to be Rishonim as well. What's the real story? What was the real story that makes a person's life turn out the way that it does? I'd just like to pause for a second and point to the fact that all the great mothers and fathers of the Jewish people all had appalling families. Would you agree? I mean, Avram Avinu, first of all, his father informs on him to the king and the authorities that he's blasphemed and claimed that Nimrod is not a god, and he's thrown into jail for 10 years. That's not a nice thing for your father to do to you. Um, and then, of course, the mothers of the Jewish people, well, they've got really horrible backgrounds. They'd come from really horrible families. And Yitzchok, leaving aside the fact that his father tried to cut his throat and burn his body to a crisp, leaving that tiny detail, peccadillo aside, there is the fact that he's got a brother called Yishmael, or Hamas, or Hezbollah, as his nickname might well be. I wouldn't like to have a sibling. It wouldn't look good in my Shidduch resume, and his brother is an Iranian terrorist. It wouldn't be so nice. And then, of course, after that, you have the next one on the list, Yaakov. Oh, he's looking good. No, 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 he's got a brother called Esav. Adolf Esav. That doesn't look good either. It's in the point I'm trying to make is that just because you have had a bad background or maybe a tough upbringing does not condemn you to, to a life which is miserable. You can go in the opposite direction and be inspired by that bad background. Anyway, what was the real reason I thought to myself that this person ended up a Russia? Unfortunately, I couldn't extend our conversation very much longer to inquire into the minutiae of the details. However, I thought it'd be useful to get if you, to let you know exactly what I'm trying to say and where my mind is going in this one, to examine another Russia. Oh, incidentally, if I didn't make clear that this year and next year is on the subject of women in the Pesach story. So that's why, and if that sounds totally contradictory, saying I'm talking about men so far, trust me, I know how to make computers work eventually. Okay, so here we have Pirkei Avos. Those of you who are taking notes. Oh, and incidentally, straight after this, I will be sending you the video so you all have a chance to keep it and refer back to it, etc. But if anybody's actually taking notes in the old-fashioned way, feather, quill, and ink, then this is in Pirkei Avos and it's Perek Dalet, and it's Mishnah Kof. And it says the following thing. Elisha ben Avuya, somebody called Elisha ben Avuya, Omer, he says, Halomad yelad lamahu daima. If you learn Torah when you're young, what's that like? What's that compared to? Now, before I tell you how he answers the question, is anybody familiar? You can do the thumbs up thing. I'll even let you unmute yourself and say the answer if you know it. Does anybody know who Elisha ben Avuya was, or what was his other name? No? He's more famously known, or rather infamously known as Acher. He is the Talmud's quintessential heretic, Epicurus. That means to say he was he was a Tana, one of the Tanoim. He was a pupil of Rabbi Akiva, so that gives you the historical sort of time frame we're talking about. Around about the time of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, for the second Beis Hamikdash. And he was the teacher of Rabbi Meir of the Mishnah. This is big stuff. And yet he becomes this big Epicurus, okay? So the obvious question is, why are we learning his Torah in the Mishnah? Surely if his views are heretical and anathema to Judaism, we should not be listening to what he has to say. And the very simple and obvious answer is, this is what he taught before he went and did all sorts of bad stuff. Oh, incidentally, he did do lots of bad stuff. It wasn't just that he rejected Judaism, rather like the Maskilim at the time of the Enlightenment in the 19th century. He went into yeshivas and tried to pull boys out and convince them that they too should follow in his rather twisted footsteps, if there is such a thing. Anyway, but let's get back to what his teaching is before he went off that path, the straight and narrow. Elisha ben Avuya, he said, Halomad yelad l'mahu, if you learn Torah when you're young, what is that like? It is like Ladio Kasuva al Niyar Chodosh. It's like writing on a blank and a clean sheet of paper. What is it like if you learn Torah when you're older? Halomad Zakin Lamahu Daima. And the answer is Ladio Kasuva al Niyar Mochok. It's like writing on paper which has been erased. So if you've ever done that, of course, the gray of the pencil is going to be harder to read because there's already a, a gray stain, as it were, from the previous writing. So that's the analogy he gives. Various other rabbis give similar analogies. One says when you're young, it's like writing which has been carved into a rock. None of it's going to be there forever. If you learn Torah when you're old, it's like writing on the sand of on the seashore. It's going to be blown or washed away. It's easily forgotten, in other words. So this is the famous story of Elisha ben Avua. What has he got to do with our story about Pesach, and particularly the story about women? For that, we'll have to turn to Rabbi Dessler. Oh, incidentally, I've got lots and lots of books here prepared for. I don't know if you can see them. My computer makes images disappear. But look, that's one advantage of teaching on Zoom. It means you can you can lots of books. Otherwise, I'm not schlepping them all. Anyway, so here is what Rabbi Dessler says, and again for those who want to take notes, it's in Chelik Gimel, in the third volume, and it's page 175. And he says, or he asks the question we just asked about this fellow. He says, how could it possibly be that a Tana, one of the Tanaim, somebody as great as this man, Elisha ben Avuya, Talmid of Rabbi Akiva, student of Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shel Rabbi Meir, the teacher of Rabbi Meir, and went out Lamaras Kol Gadolas Tzarasa, despite his greatness in Torah, Yotzal Tarbashroy, he went out and did all sorts of evil and terrible things. So it's our question going back to that immigration hall in Toronto Pearson Airport with the fellow there. What caused him to go off? But here we have answers. So this is the first answer. So when the Medrash talks about this, and the Gemara talks about this, both in the Bavli and in the Yerushalmi, says the following thing. It opens with a verse from Koheles, which I think, if I remember rightly in English, is Ecclesiastes. Is it Ecclesiastes? Koheles? Anyway, Koheles. Shlomo HaMelech's wisdom. That's good enough for you and me. It says, Toiv achros dover merishisoi. Toiv, now, some ladies there whose Ivrit's probably much better than mine. Toiv achris dover merishisoi. Anybody want to have a shot at translating that? Unmute yourself and show off. Aha.
I would say the end of something is better than the beginning, like
Yeah,
the
that's
result or whatever than the start.
excellent. That's the normal translation. And I'm listening as I go walks every day. I tend to walk 8 kilometers a day. So sometimes I listen to Shiur and sometimes I listen to books. And I'm listening to an interesting biography of Mark Twain, of course. What else would an Orthodox rabbi listen to at the moment? And he quoted this, and that's more or less the translation that he had. But in actual fact, I think the better translation goes like this: Toiv achris dover. The end of the thing is merishisoi. It's toiv because of its beginning. Because, in other words, if you've got green fingers and you plant things in your marpeset, or if you've got lucky enough to have a garden, if you plant your seeds properly at the right time, with the right depth in the soil, and if it's going to need support, you put in a little pole for it, etc. If you prepare the beginning correctly, then the end is going to be good. Then you've got a nice straight tree, straight plant, whatever it is. The end, the happy end of the thing, so Tov Achrisdover, and Achrisdover, the conclusion of something is going to be good as a consequence of the beginning. So that's how the translation that Rabbi Dessler likes to put it here. Tov Achrisdover, maybe she say. And then he goes on to say, as long as you've got a good beginning, you're probably going to have a good end. I mean, people have got freedom of choice. People can blow it. Um, does that apply to the great rabbi, Elisha ben Avua, when he became Acher? In actual fact, it does. So this great man, he was something wrong with his beginning. What was wrong with his beginning? So I'll tell you the rest outside rather than reading to you, seeing I've kept you waiting long enough with my computer ineptitudes. Basically, his father had made a Suda to celebrate Elisha ben Avua's bris milah. Okay, his father was very rich, lived in Jerusalem, And he invited all the great rabbis and all the big machers of Yerushalayim at the time. And when they come in, there are two sitting in the corner. And it's interesting, they say what they had there. They had music, there was dancing, rakitas, lots of nice food. And in the corner were two rabbis sitting and learning, and flames erupted round about them. And Elisha ben Avua's father said, "Whoa, what's that? Quick, get the fire brigade." Um, and in actual fact, somebody said, "No, calm down, calm down. They're just learning Torah." When those two guys learn Torah, that always happens. Just fire erupts. It's like Mount Sinai. When the Torah was given then, there was fire, all over the place. Well, they're in such a spiritual level that that's what happens. And Elisha ben Avua's father said, and I'm choosing my translation here carefully, cool. Oh, that'd be really good for my son to grow up and be able to do tricks like that. That's really, really good. And as a consequence, he sent him off to yeshiva, etc., etc. The story seems to be that the origins of the journey, the rabbinic, the Torah journey of Elisha ben Avua was not for the right motivation. You're supposed to be learning Torah, not as matter of ego and gaiva to have a nice rabbinic coat with two buttons at the back so people stand up for you when you come into the room, or a big shtreimel, or whatever it is. You're supposed to be learning it to connect you with God. But his planting, when he was a seedling, he was put into earth, which was very shallow indeed. It was shallow enough that it was going to be affected by, the outside and what people thought. Does that make sense? With me so far? Okay. Now, having said that, let's move on to something else. We'll return to the four sons. Okay. It's interesting. I think if I ask people, name one episode or part of the Haggadah that pops to your mind, if I say Haggadah, what bit comes to mind? I think, probably people say Avodah Meinu or Damned or Dea. I mean, there's lots of good bits, but I think the Four Sons is pretty central. And so I happen to have a Haggadah here, which I prepared before the share. And let's just visit the Four Sons again. Baruch Hamochem Baruch Hu, Baruch Shenas Torah L'Am Yisrael. Baruch Hu, Keneged Arba Bonim Dibra Torah. The Torah addresses or talks about four sons. Echad Chochem, that's the wise one. Echad Rasha, that's the bad one. Echad Tom, that's the one who's simple. But Echad She'enu Yedei Lisha, the one who doesn't know how to ask. That's the one we're going to look at. We know the Chochem and the Rasha and the Tom, and then we come to She'enu Yedei Lisha. And this is what it says about him. But She'enu Yedei Lisha, and the one who doesn't know how to ask. In other words, this is a very little child. It's up to you to explain to him why, as we do so often when we're having our share, I often say to you, why isn't it in the plural when it should be in the singular? Why isn't it masculine when it should be in the feminine? You've got to alert this child, girl or boy, to the fact that the Torah is not written by accident, that God doesn't make mistakes, no oops, etc., so that they know how to ask, well, why is it written that way? But he doesn't know or she doesn't know how to do it herself. So you've got to do it for them. You will, as it were, open that door or that inquiry, that question in their mind. And that's there's a posuk that supports that idea. Look at the word at, or consider the word at. At psachlo. How would you translate at? Well, it means you. What gender is it? It's the feminine. It's the feminine gender. You're going to open. It's the mother who's going to open the child's mind, and let him understand how things work. Astonishing. At the beginning, when the child is starting to grow, when it's most tender and most fragile, the Jewish education that's going to, as it were, embed itself, take roots in the child's soul, will come from the mother. Later on, there will be a stage, and there's debate as to exactly what the age of chinuch is. Is it 3? Is it 9? Is it bar mitzvah? And then what the child should be learning at each stage. At some point, the mother will hand the child, as it were, who's already formed, she's formed him, over to the father, who will as it were, polished the diamond, but she produced the diamond. It's the mother's education to the child that's going to create the firmness of the roots to take hold. Now, if you've got this book here, which I'm sure you have, I hope you can see that. It's written by my favorite author, popping up at the bottom there, Rabbi Y.Y. Rubenstein. I want to be just like him when I grow up. In the introduction at the beginning, it says the following thing. In page 6, so if you've got it at home, you can read this. We're talking with somebody called Rabbi Salman Zarotskin, and he's talking about women. And it's interesting, I think I mentioned to you that the Chofetz Chaim called Reb Salman Sorotzkin, he's famous for two books. One's called the Das Ve'Adea, and the other one is his commentary on the Torah, which is called Oznaim LaTorah, which is a very interesting title, Oznaim LaTorah. Ears for the Torah. Ears for the Torah. What does that mean? But it's actually a posuk. I can't remember where. It's a posuk somewhere in Nach that says, ears to the Torah. That was it brings it to life. Anyway, the Chofetz Chaim called him his rabbi, but the Chofetz Chaim was older than him, much older than him. It was that the town that the Chofetz Chaim was born in, whose name I've forgotten, I'm afraid, it was that town that he became the rabbi of. So he, with affection, he used to call him my rabbi. He was the rabbi of my community, of my town, in other words. Anyway, basically, he says the following thing. So Rav Zalman Sorotzkin points to a woman's unique path in Torah by commenting on something surprising that occurred when Hashem offered the Torah to the Jewish people. The Torah says, now this will be familiar, Moshe goes up to it. Hashem calls him from the mountain saying, this is what you shall say to Beis Yaakov and tell Bnei Israel. And that's in Shmos 19:3. In case you're, again, taking notes. Let's look at that again a little bit more slowly. Hashem says to Moshe, this is what you'll say to Beis Yaakov, and you'll tell Bnei Israel. So clearly, there are two categories of Jew that are being addressed here. It's pretty obvious to you and I in our time who the Beis Yaakov are. Rashi explains. But in our society, in our times, Beis Yaakov is synonymous to girls' schools. It's a girls' thing. Benos Yaakov, or Beis Yaakov, refers to Benos Yaakov, the woman of Klal Yisrael. So Hashem offers the Torah to the women first, and then offers it to the men. Fine. Then he writes, Beis Yaakov, the house of Yaakov, refers to the woman. Why did Hashem speak to them first? Men are given, now I translated this. I'm going to read to you how I translated it here, but I think in reflection I would translate it differently today. You'll see why in a second. And men are given a strong intellect. But I would think that I mistranslated that, or it could have been translated better. I would say that men are given an aggressive intellect. If you think about your son, or your husbands, or your fathers, when they were learning, if they were learning with chavrusas, or you see your son learning, when boys actually are learning together in Torah, it's quite aggressive. It's very aggressive. In fact, the Talmud, I don't know if you know this, the Talmud actually discusses this. It says that if you were to walk into yeshiva and you knew nothing about Jewish culture and Torah culture, and you saw boys there learning together, then you would probably say to yourself, whoa, any moment this guy's going to punch, Avram's going to punch Shmuel in the nose. Because they're screaming at each other. In fact, I had a chavrusa in Gates of Yeshiva. They used to grab me like this, grab my jacket, and twist at me his fingers. No! And said, no! He's now, incidentally, the chief rabbi of Gibraltar, Rabbi Chassid. Still a very dear friend. No hard feelings. But if you didn't know, you would think, well, there's going to be a war here any second. But when boys are learning, they're very aggressive. There's no ill feeling. And that's the astonishing thing. That's in fact the end of the closest friends. In fact, for men, and maybe for women as well, I don't know, I've never been a woman, but for a man, the closest, and that's certainly true in my case, the closest and the most important friendships in my life are the men I learnt with in yeshiva, or the boys I learnt with in yeshiva. It appeals somehow, it just touches the male thing. And we're very aggressive. Right? Men have got an aggressive intellect. I think I translate it today that way. However, women, he says, but women are created with deep feelings, said the Chofetz Chaim's rabbi, which is the source from which faith is acquired. An emotional approach, an emotional relationship with God, that's where Amunah is established. This is why it's clear that faith, this is why it is clear that faith is stronger in women than in men. And that is why Hashem spoke to them first. The woman would be easiest to convince, and they in turn would convince their husbands and children to accept the yoke of the Torah and mitzvahs. Well, that's very, very interesting. Because if we go back to ask or revisit our question, what caused Elisha ben Avua to go off the derech? The answer is very simple. The Haggadah says at the beginning of a young man, of a little boy's education, it's the mother who is going to educate him. And what's she going to put in him? She's going to put in him which is something which is innate to her. Amunah and Hashem is Baruch. An emotional attachment to God. Then after that, she can hand it over to the father and he can do the aggressive intellectual stuff. That's nice. But in Elisha ben Avua's case, who launched and who designed the trajectory of his Jewish education? His father, and for the wrong reasons. And consequently, it's not going to be well rooted in the soil and will grow a little bit twisted or disabled, if you like, if that makes sense. Does that with me so far? Nodding? Excellent. Okay. Amuna and connection with Hashem is going to be very
I'm
important.
sorry. Can I just ask a question? How does this correlate with what you said about our avos and imahos who did not have? I'm assuming. I mean, we don't know about Avram's mother or Rivka's mother, but we're not assuming that they gave them a good. Like they also had a bad beginning, but turned out differently.
That's a very interesting question. The answer is to that. First of all, we do know a little bit about Avram Avinu's mother. It's called Amislai Bas Carnival. And Amislai Bas Carnival, intriguingly, is her name is a segula to say. So that's a good thing to when I send you the tape, you can look back at that. It's a very important thing to say for the fuas and all that sort of stuff. But when the decree is passed from the king Nimrod that all boys are going to be killed at birth because he's warned that there's going to be a boy born who's going to challenge him, rather like later on is going to happen with Pharaoh and Moshe, then his mother famously hides him in the cave. And when he emerges from the cave 3 years, there's different opinions later. Then she sends him to school. Right, the decree is over. Children aren't going to be killed anymore, and she sends him to school. Where does she send him? To the yeshiva of Shem and Aver. Now, as I'm giving a share to women, and I'm assuming most of you will be mothers, you will know, of course, that every Jewish mother seeks the very best school, the very best yeshiva or Beis Yaakov for their son or their daughter. And of course, if we're really being honest, no yeshiva or school is ever good enough for my child, unless, of course, it's the school that I happen to be the principal of. But you send your child to school that you think is going to be best. Let's say your child is a very gifted musical child. He plays the violin or whatever it is, and generally that implies that it comes from a musical family, because most musical children do come from a musical background. Then you're going to send him to a musical school. And if he's very good at mathematics, then you'll send him to a science-based school, etc., etc. It's intriguing to note that she sends him to a yeshiva. Now, no Jewish mother's going to send them to school. Oh, that sounds nice. Yeshiva. I don't know what that means. Go there. She knows what it means. In the female line, and this also answers the second part of your question, the female line of the family of Avram Avinu never lost. In fact, the family of Avram Avinu never lost their connection to God, or their knowledge of God, which was lost to the world after the Tower of Babel, and the language that everybody spoke, which was Hebrew, was lost to the world, except to one family, which was Avram Avinu's family. You can see when Eliezer comes to collect Rivka, that her brother Laban says, "Come in, my master. I've cleaned the house." And it didn't mean Pesach cleaning. He'd taken away all the idols. He knew that Avram Avinu's Talmud, and he was his Talmud, Eliezer, would not come into a house full of idols. So he knew about it, but he didn't believe in it. I mean, he wasn't strong in that sense. His sister was. The females of that family, which is why, of course, they all married into the same family, that truth, those truths were the fundamental and were kept by the women who were much stronger and faithful, just as we're saying, have stronger amuna, even from the very inception of the Jewish people, have stronger amuna in Hashem than do the men. But that's the idea I'm going to be pursuing in a second. I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Can I ask a question also?
Yes, sure.
Hi. Right.
Hi.
In terms of the lashon that you said it said at
Yes.
and that's how we know they're talking about the females.
Yes.
But don't we have sometimes where we use
Yes.
female lashon and we
Yep.
really are still talking to men? Like
Yes.
meaning that I'm not 100% sure. I didn't have time to go check my
No, no,
chumash.
you're quite. You're
But
quickly rush to your
Veschanan,
library. Yeah, no problem. You're 100% right. Sometimes a female word does mean masculine, and that gets a bit tricky. But in this case, everybody accepts that at is in the feminine, and it does refer to the mother. So you're right. Sometimes a female word can be masculine and masculine the other way around. This is a female word, which is a female word. And all the commentators, not all the commentators,
okay.
just Jews, and
Okay.
never all. But yes, indeed. So it's referring to the woman. And that's why it's very important. Women are going to be able to give the root the child, and that's Amuna, because they have much more than that. Look, I'm coming to this in a second, but I can't resist telling you, when we go out from Egypt, at the moment I'm going to take you into Egypt, but when we go out from Egypt, famously, Moshe sings the song of praise to God for having saved us. And then the men repeat each verse after him, right? What's it called? What's it when you sing just by voice? Oh, forget this word.
Cappella,
A
acapella.
cappella. Thank you so much. A cappella. Thank you. And they all go a cappella. But the women it isn't a cappella because they bring out their musical instruments. So why did they bring out their musical instruments? Because the woman had stronger faith that God was not going to let them down and God was going to complete the story, complete this journey with a happy ending. And therefore, we're going to have to sing. And we want to do it really nice. So let's bring out our lyres and our harps and all our drums and tambourines and all that sort of stuff. The men didn't bring out their musical instruments. Why not? They weren't so sure. They didn't have such a strong faith. Women have a stronger emunah. And that's what we're going to know. So let me just take you back there. So basically, Pharaoh's plan at the beginning of the story, which we all know. So if you look in the book of Exodus and you look at chapter 1 and verse 1, Va'elu Shemais b'nei Yisrael b'nei Mitzrayim, these are the Jews that come down to Egypt. But if we leap from verse 1 to verse 10, then we find the following thing. The problem the Egyptian people have complained to Pharaoh is the classic anti-Semitic problem, or rather the problem of anti-Semites. Too many damn Jews. Place is rotten with Jews. Jews everywhere. And if you know any non-Jewish people, I mean, not closely, but if you ask any non-Jewish person in a sort of like way where they don't really know you're Jewish, they are convinced that we are one of the most enormously numerous people in the world. I used to be very friendly with the chief rabbi in Mexico. It was a lovely man. We said share him together several times in England. And he told me once he was a Spanish speaker. He was in a taxi in Mexico City. So he said to the taxi driver, how many Jews are there? How many Jews are there in Mexico City, do you think? And the guy said, oh, in Mexico City, oh, I think maybe 1 million, maybe 2 million. Um, Incidentally, that was not too bad a Mexican accent. I'm sorry. I don't mind if you burst into applause because you're all on mute. But anyways, I've seen this many, many times before. I remember a non-Jewish policeman telling me in Gateshead after an anti-Semitic incident in which I was involved. In other words, I beat up the anti-Semite, not the other way about. That basically, he said, I don't know, and this is the northeast of England accent. I don't know why they start with you guys. I mean, there are thousands of you. Well, there was only 350 families in Gateshead in those days, and it's not much more these days. But in the non-Jewish mind, they see Jews everywhere. And that's the problem. So they come to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says the following critical words. Hovan ischak. Let's be clever with the Jews. Let's have strategies here. Hovan ischak. And the wisdom that they wanted to deploy with the Jews was in two parts. One was seduction, and then the second part was oppression. Seduction and oppression. The seduction was of the 210 years that we were in Egypt, the first 180 were really nice. They treated us very, very nice. Or 130 were really very, very nice. They treated us very nicely and come and join our, come to the theater with us and come and join in our culture and you know, and come to the symphony orchestra and they read our books. And the idea was to get the Jews to abandon God, to volunteer to do so. I was learning with my chavrusa just the other day, and this is, those of you who know me, I translated Shiur B'tochen and the Chovos Levovos, so this is Chovos Levovos there. And I told him, because I know the book quite well, I said, I'm going to insist we do a bit of jumping, but not at the beginning. Here, this is what he says at the introduction, and this is so, so critical. I don't know if you know this. This is big stuff. In my book, in all my books, don't you ever see any old-fashioned Gemorahs or a Shulchan Aruchs? The printer has put a hand like this at the side of the page, pointing at a bit. That means it's important. I do that in all my books. Important bit. So I've got a hand, and underneath I've written the deal. This is the deal. And this is the very first words of the Shiur B'tochen, the book of having a relationship, having emunah in Hashem. And he says the following thing. Let me read this to you. So if you believe, he's talking about if you believe in God, you're giving yourself the gift of a worry-free existence. Doesn't mean to say there'll be no worries in your life. It's just that you ultimately, your position will be, I don't know why God's doing this to me, but I've got trust in him. So you'll think at the end of the day, it's going to work out. Gam Zulataiva. Okay. Then he says, Hu b'teach b'mashu acher. But if you believe in any other thing apart from God, right? Of course, God's great and he controls the whole world, but basically, when it comes to financial things and financial matters and investments, pretty good. When I not Viktor Rubenstein, by the way. I'm pretty good, and I know exactly what shares and which bonds to invest in, etc. Or if you believe in the doctor's going to cure you, yeah, without God, or you believe in the politicians or political systems. The Americans could never let anti-Semitism grow there. If you believe in that sort of stuff. So, if you believe in anything else to any degree that's other than God, God will withdraw his protection, his supervision, and his intervention in your life relative to that fraction or that percentage which you have devoted elsewhere. So if you believe in God 50%, but 10% is your own economic or financial abilities, 20% is your doctor's medical abilities, and then the rest is Donald Trump or whoever the Democratic guys are these days. Then if you have told God basically 50% is me, God withdraws 50% of his control of your life. If you tell God, in other words, to get lost, he'll get lost. But then you can't turn around and complain when he's not there, when the people you believed in and trusted in let you down. As King David famously says, only a fool believes in human beings. Human beings are fallible. Therefore, Hashem will withdraw his control of your life or his intervention in your life relative to what you've invested elsewhere. Fine, if that's what you want, you can have it. It's not a problem. It's a lesson. It's not. He's not having a hissy fit. Hashem's not, angry here. I'm afraid you're going to have to, touch that hot surface to learn that it's going to burn you. And I'm afraid Jewish people and human beings in general sometimes have to be bitten before we learn not to put our hand in the cage. But anyway, so we've got two ways to get the Jews. First of all, we'll welcome them in. Then they will volunteer to tell God to get lost. No, we want to be Egyptians. And remember, that worked. Remember, 4/5 of the Jews decide, yep, we want to be Egyptians. And don't come out when they could have gone out. And it's only a tiny fraction that actually stick with it. And then, after they have told God to get lost, and he's not there, he's not protecting them, then they go for us. And that's the last 80 years of Egypt. And that's when it gets really nasty and really horrible. So it really worked. And how do you know it really worked? Because the greatest Jew of the generation, who was the greatest Jew of the generation before Moshe comes on the scene?
Hold that for a second. I can't. It's
Elias, can you switch off your microphone? Oh, somebody can through there.
I think Amram, was it Amram, his father?
Yes, Amram, Moshe's father, and Moshe's not born yet, but Amram was the greatest Jew of the generation. All the Jews, all the Jewish men are totally broken by the experience. You know the Medrash that says that they gave the men women's work to do and the women men's work to do. And this is part of the Hovanis Chakmah. Let's be wise with them. Because the idea was to destroy the spirit of the Jewish people, the morale of the Jewish people. Your average man is obviously stronger than your average woman. Right, and there was all this thing about a year ago or 2 years ago, this ridiculous Algerian boxer pretending he was a woman and getting into the ring with women and punching them so hard he could easily kill them. Could easily kill them. But your average man is stronger than the average woman. For a man to be, as it were, his job is to wash the dishes at the sink, looking out the window and seeing his mother and his wife and his daughter and his sister schlepping huge big rocks that maybe a group of men together, working together, might just manage to move. Well, they can't. It was all to break their spirit, and it was successful. The men gave up. We know that because the greatest of the men gave up, and that was Amram. And he divorced his wife. He divorced Yocheved, Moshe's mother, and said, what's the point of bringing children into this hell, into this oppression? It's a terrible thing. And anyway, the boys are going to be killed at birth. And so he divorced Yocheved, and when the greatest rabbi of the generation divorced his wife, all the other men divorced their wives, and no babies were being born. As a consequence of no babies being born, then they're not going to be killed. Except that his daughter, Miriam, who's just a little girl, says, your decree is, Elise, could you mute yourself, please? If you're behaving more cruelly than Pharaoh. Pharaoh is only decreed against the boys. You've decreed against the boys and the girls. And as a consequence, he remarries her mother, and all the men remarry their wives, and babies are brought back into the world. You see, Pharaoh's plan was brilliant, to break the connection between the Jewish people and God, and also to break the morale of the Jewish people. And it worked on the men. It did not work in the women. And that was the mistake that Pharaoh made. When he said, and after the nice beginning, when the Jews give up religion, what was the first mitzvah that the Jewish men gave up? Or Jewish people gave up? Bris Milah. Bris Milah. Because Bris Milah made us look different, and we didn't want to look different. We wanted to be just like the Egyptians. That's why, of course, on the Passover night, then there was two bloods that were put on the doorpost. The blood of the Passover sacrifice and the blood of Bris Milah. Because that's us undoing the damage that we did originally. So when that happened, the men they gave up. It was too horrible. The greatest Jew of the generation gave up, but the woman never gave up. Because the emunah is stronger in women than it is with men. Now, why is that? Why is it that even the greatest man can be defeated when the women were never? See, that was the mistake that Pharaoh made. Yeah, they were trying to break the spirit of the Jewish people, and they thought we'll go for the strongest, the men. Well, sorry, men aren't the strongest. The women are the strongest. And that was his big mistake. But he succeeded with the men. The men, even Amram wanted to give up. The men didn't want to have any children. The women seduced their own husbands. We read about that in last week's parsha. The copper mirrors that women used to make themselves look beautiful, to be attractive to their husbands, so that children would be conceived. That was a woman's initiative. And that becomes part of the furniture of the Mishkan, of the Holy of Holies, because it's a salute to women whose strength, whose emunah is their strength, and much greater than that in men. Let's see where we go from here. Why are men not as strong as women? This is something we discussed before. Remember, I've told you my wife likes to say that men are fixers. Men have a problem that women don't have, and that is that men have got enormous egos. Sorry to say that. I am a man, and I do have an enormous ego. In my case, it's justified. But for most men, it's not justified. But they still have enormous egos. And therefore, indeed, I am a fixer. I like fixing things. I really do. I like, after this, I'm going to go and buy some paint thinner and take the varnish off our silver tray and candlesticks, which has all gone yellow. Apparently, it happens when you bring it to Israel. I'm going to take that all off. I get a lot of pleasure out of fixing things. Fixing things. Men do. Because when you fix things, I'm saying it now, so geschmack. I fixed this and I look at it. I made that. I'm very good at this sort of stuff, actually. And it gives me a lot of pleasure. It's an ego trip. Well, this is this. I once built a wall in my house. I can do that sort of stuff. It's an ego trip. Women have far smaller egos than men. And remember, we discussed this. It has to be like that because women give birth to babies. And giving birth to a baby is a very dangerous thing to do. Their lives are often in danger. And obviously, it's a communal activity. No woman volunteers to give birth to a baby herself. That's just insanity. You need help. A woman needs help. That's why we have midwives who are there in order to help you give birth to a baby. So therefore, consequently, they have less egos. And then after that, they've given birth to the baby. A lot of their life is going to be devoted to looking after that baby and nursing that baby. The guy, fantastic. You're mazel tov, you're the baby, breathes, fantastic. Back to normal. Not in case of a woman. She might want to go and visit a friend. She might want to go and do something. The baby needs nursing. She just sits down and she has to nurse the baby. My life is given over to others in a way that men's lives are not given over to others. There's that beautiful Yiddish word I shared with you once, Übergegebenkeit. Women have more Übergegebenkeit than men do. Consequently, when men want to fix stuff, and then at the very end, usually, when they realize they can't, then their spirit is broken as a consequence that they can't fix it. But women with smaller egos are willing to let other people into their lives to help them. They know innately they can do it all themselves. I'm not going to give birth to a baby on my own. I need people to help me. And they have room in their minds and in their hearts for people other than them, including God. So they've got much stronger munah naturally than men do. Yeah. I can't resist telling you this. I don't know if I've told you this always gets me in tears. Maybe I'll get through this without. This book here is called Lekut Sichos Musar, and it's by somebody called Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac Sher, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of Slobodka, which is really the mother yeshiva of all the Lithuanian yeshivas. And he says the following thing. Listen to this. This is so beautiful. As we said before, the babies are going to be taken at birth of the boys and killed. So what happened was, the Medrash says the following thing. You probably know this story. The Medrash says that the woman, I'll read a bit to you in Hebrew. Kivin she'agias man melodehim. When the time came for them to give birth, the woman used to sneak out to the fields to an apple tree. Now this is a Medrash, so there's all sorts of symbolism in an apple tree. Anyway, but they hid under trees or something or other, and they gave birth on their own. Below Etzev, without any pain. Below called Chevli Leda, without any of the, was the pangs of childbirth, is that what they call it? Hanicha Shama Shisha giving birth to how many babies in Egypt? 6 babies. But Omra, and then she turned around and said to God, a Jewish woman, Ani Asisi Eshli. I played my part, Hashem. I've done everything I can do. But Ato Asa Eshlach. Now it's up to you. I've done everything I can do. You've got to take it from here. And you probably know the Medrash says that God did all sorts of miracles to save these babies. And miraculously, they were brought up by God himself. Whatever this means. We don't have time to go into this. But watch what comes next, which I think is absolutely beautiful. So it says, therefore, after many years, remember having six babies every year, right? So many years later, then a group of um, young men who apparently knew where their homes were and recognized their mothers would come, handsome, perfect, and they'd come in and say, "Mom, Mom, do you remember us?" This is an alert in my area. Sorry, the Iranians want to come to the Shiur. But unless the siren goes out outside, we can carry on. But it will. That noise is so annoying. Is basically we will carry on, but I might have to close the windows out here. Anyway, what's up to? And the speaks of it, he says. So he writes. Can you imagine a Simcha greater than that? I think it's a beautiful idea. Imagine that. That's incidentally when it comes to Kiryas Yamsuf, when the Jews said Ze Keli Vandehu, the boys, those boys are pointing. That's I can see that. That's that man. I can see the vision of the man that looked after us. It was a Shem in some sort of Malach type form, I suppose. That sort of idea. Um, so therefore, it was women who never gave up. It was women who made their husbands give birth to children. It was not one woman gave even one gold ring, not even a broken gold ring, to the men to make the golden calf. It was a completely male mistake. Women have stronger faith in Amunah and Hashem than men do. It was the women who went into the land of Israel. The generation that died in the desert, that was the men who listened to the spies. The women didn't believe it. They had faith in God. And therefore, if that's what's going to be implanted at the beginning of a Jewish boy's life from his mother at Psach Law, it's going to be so much greater. Finish with the story. I don't know if I ever told this story. There's an organization in America called Lynx. And Lynx is an organization for girls, originally girls, who've lost a parent. Somebody said to me recently, what about the boys? Well, they do have a boys branch, but I hope they'll forgive me saying so, it's a bit of a flop. It's nothing wrong with them. They're trying their best. It's just that boys don't go to these sorts of things. Girls are quite happy to go to Shabbatons and events because, again, in a woman's nature, they're more communal. They know you need to share. Boys, of course, are fixers from the beginning. And oh, I lost my father. That's no problem. And I'll go through this all myself. Anyway, the first Shabbaton I went to, when I got there, the organizer asked to speak to me after Friday night. She said, "There's a girl here. She's 15. It's her first time ever here. And her father dropped down dead of a heart attack when she was 12. And her mother's just been diagnosed with liver cancer. Obviously terrible. Will I speak to her?" she said. And so I said, "Sure." I mean, was I qualified to speak to her? I don't think so. I mean, my late wife died from cancer, and I saw the damage that did to my kids. But two parents, well, I hadn't died, but Anyway, so we sat outside in a little table with two chairs, and I can't remember a word of what I said to her, nor can I remember what she said to me. But the feedback that I got was that it was useful, it was positive. Fine. So I saw this girl at least once a year after that, because when the annual retreat, Shabbaton, took place, I'd see her there. And then I was still living in New York. I was flying back from Israel to New York. I was on a lecture here. And as I was coming into touchdown, I'm sure we all do the same thing. You switch your phone on. And there was a cascade of texts and WhatsApps and emails that come tumbling in. And there was an email from the organization to say that the girl is sitting Shiva and her mother had died. She's now, 17, 18, something like that. And could I go and see her? This was on Thursday. The next day, Friday, was the last day. And the problem was that I came back from Israel with a very, very heavy flu. I was feeling awful. It combined with the jet lag, there's nothing I wanted more in the world to do than to find my bed and climb under the blankets, just curl up. Woke up the next day and said, "No, I've got to go." So I got into the car and I drove. I used to live in the Five Towns. She lived somewhere in New Jersey. I can't remember where. So it took, those of you who are familiar with New York will know, it took me about 3 hours to get from my front door to hers. And the entire 3 hours let me just close the ugh, you know, the Lisa? It's exciting, isn't it? Yeah. Right. I'm back. We are locked. Anyway, so the entire 3 hours, I was thinking as hard as I could, what can I possibly say for this girl, to this girl, to make it better? And maybe it's because of the flu, not sure. I arrived at her house and I honestly had not thought of one single thought and single thing that I could possibly say. So basically, I walked into the house, and when I walked into the house, I was very glad that I went. It's a big, big house. She was a Balas Tshuva, and her sister, who there was only one sister, only one sibling, she wasn't from. They were sitting Shiva. There was nobody else there apart from a neighbor and also a an aunt, and that was it. So the sister, she said to me, I'll let you two speak. The rabbi thing was a bit too much for her. And I sat down, and as it were, the spotlight was on me, but I didn't have a script. I had nothing to say, so like, action, take one. I didn't have to. She started speaking to me. She said, I know it must be difficult for you, but you don't have to say anything. I'm very sad at what's happened, but I know it all comes from Hashem. I don't understand why Hashem's chosen this path for me. 18-year-old girl. But I know that this is Gamza Lutava. I've booked my ticket, I'm going to seminary in Israel in 2 weeks' time. I'm supposed to be going and I'm still going. And indeed she did. I thought I'd come there to, try and give a bit of inspiration to her. Mm, she gave it to me. This is the sort of young Jewish woman that Para would have failed miserably on. Her betochen, her emunah was complete. Incidentally, she went to seminary, was there for a year, came back. 6 months later, she got engaged, married a very sweet young man, and is living in Brooklyn with her family to this day. It's the woman's emunah that you need to be the foundations of the Jewish people, to grow a Jewish child, a girl certainly, but certainly also a boy, at Psachloi. If it comes that we create a Jewish people through Jewish women to impart that deep, deep roots of emunah, everything else follows from that. Paro's mistake, Hobbin Law, they're applauding me. Yes, the men are giving up. We've got the strong ones. They hadn't got the strong ones. Jewish women are the strong ones that got us out of Mitzrayim. Jewish women are the strong ones that get us out of the mess that we're in. Whenever we're in, including like that dramatic intervention from Iran just now, it's the emunah of Klal Yisrael's woman, Beis Yaakov, that get us through. I shall look forward, hopefully more calmly, speaking to you next week.
Ron Hashem, have a good week and Chodesh Tov, everybody. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you so much. Thanks for waiting, guys.